I'm really grateful. If you don't mind me starting a little bit with philosophy, there's the MICA mandate, which I'm not sure by your expression you know, but you've heard it before. It's do justice, love mercy.
That mandate I do know.
Yes, and walk humbly. It seems like a pretty good mandate for life.
Yes.
And this idea of justice, to me, is fundamental to the ideals of a nation, founded with a lot of injustice at the time, but the brilliance of the imperfect geniuses of our founders who aspired to create a society that, John Lewis and others would have called the more beloved community. And one of my, an activist I've read a lot, a theologian, said, what does love look like in public? It looks like justice. And you have, to me, perhaps one of the more important positions on the planet Earth for trying to create a more just society. And the issues of race, and I was really grateful that you, in your opening remarks, talked about your agency actually coming about to deal with issues of justice in our nation. I want to talk to you about white supremacist violence, which has been mentioned a lot. But before I get there, I'm actually concerned with something that I consider pernicious and very difficult to root out, which is the realities of implicit racial bias that lead to larger systemic racism. Now, I've been kind of stunned that the issue of systemic racism has become something argued over, but if I can just walk you through for a second, does our justice system treat people equally in this country at this point?
Sadly, and it's plain to me that it does not.
And I'm going to stop you there. I mean, Brian Stevenson says we have a criminal justice system that treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent, because one's finances make a difference often with what kind of justice one gets. Is that correct?
Senator, there's no question that there's disparate treatment in our justice system. Mass incarceration is a very good example of this problem. We're incarcerating 25%, almost 25% of the world's population, and we have something like 5% of the world's population. I don't think that is because Americans are worse. But what underlies that is the disparate treatment of blacks and communities of color.
Well, let's drill down on that for a second.
Yeah.
So one of the big things driving arrests in our country, stunningly to me, even that it's still the case, is marijuana arrests. We had in 2019 more marijuana arrests for possession than all violent crime arrests combined. Now, when you break out that data and disaggregate along racial lines, it is shocking that an African American has no difference in usage or selling than someone who's white in America, but their likelihood of being arrested for doing things that 2 of the last 4 presidents admitted to doing is 3 to 4 times higher than somebody white. Is that evidence that within the system there is implicit racial bias? Yes or no, sir?
Well, it's definitely evidence of a disparate treatment in the system, which I think does arise out of implicit bias. Unconscious bias, maybe, sometimes conscious bias.
And I think that's the fair point. Unconscious or conscious, nonetheless, it results in a system. And I've had great conversations with people on both sides of the aisle, heads of think tanks that all speak to this as abhorrent to American ideals, that we still have a system that so disparately treats people at every point. The station house adjustment, which I know you know what that is, which I've seen happen as a mayor, that people get called in for, arrested for possession of marijuana, and the police make a decision like just leave and your parents come or whatever, and it's dismissed with. We see from station house adjustments to charging, to bail, to sentencing, every objective analysis has shown that race right now in our country is still playing a specific influence in the justice that someone gets. You're aware of all of this, yes?
I am, and this is a particular part of the reason why at this moment I think I wanted to be the Attorney General.
Right.
I want to do the best I can to stop this.
I want to get to that. To the point that a lot of my folks are making, you just made, it does not mean that the people who are engaged in this are racist overtly. It means that they have an implicit racial bias that often leads them to make different decisions about different people. That's correct.
Yes, and also for example, the marijuana example is a perfect example that you've given here. Here's a nonviolent crime that, with respect to usage, that does not require us to incarcerate people, and we're incarcerating at different rates, significantly different rates compare of the different communities, and that is wrong. And it's the kind of problem that will then follow a person for the rest of their lives. It will make it impossible to get a job. It will lead to a downward economic spiral for their family.
Right. And so to that point, and now to your point I cut you off on before, now I would like to give you a chance to answer to that. Here you were in an agency that was formed to deal with the kind of systemic racism that was going on at that time. When you have disparate use of the law, where you see African Americans being churned into the criminal justice system, where it is concentrated in certain communities and not in others, where it has, as the American Bar Association says, 40,000 collateral consequences on the lives of those African Americans, where they can't get loans from banks, they can't get jobs, they can't get certain business licenses, where it is so dramatic that there are estimates that it costs literally to African Americans in the persistence of a wealth gap in our country, where black families have 1/10 the wealth of white families. If you just look at the impact of the law and the disparate impact on just marijuana, it is estimated to cost African American communities in this country billions of dollars more. My question to you now is, assuming this position where you are called upon for that MICA mandate, what are you going to do about this outrageous injustice that persists and infects our society with such a toll on black and brown communities?
So there are many things that the Justice Department has to do in this regard, and I completely agree that the disparate results with respect to wealth accumulation, discrimination in employment, discrimination in housing, discrimination in healthcare availability, all of which we all see now in the consequences of a pandemic, which affects communities of color enormously more with respect to infection rates, with respect to hospitalization, and ultimately to death. So one set of things we can do is the mass incarceration example that I began with. We can focus our attention on violent crimes and other crimes that put great danger in our society, and not allocate our resources to something like marijuana possession. We can look at our charging policies and go and stop charging the highest possible offense with the highest possible sentence.
I was taught in law school never to interrupt a judge of your
I don't think it applies.
So forgive me. I would like to end with this question, and then my time is up.
Yeah.
You've talked to me a lot about your thoughts about this, and I've been really inspired. But it gets back to your conviction in this issue and your determination to go down at a time when our nation needs this, to go down as one of the great leaders when it comes to dealing with the daily unconscionable injustices faced by some Americans and not others at the hands of law enforcement. And I think that one thing you said to me privately particularly motivated me to believe you when you talk about your aspirations. And I'm wondering if you could just conclude by answering the question about your motivation and maybe some of your own family history in confronting hate and discrimination in American history.
Yes, Senator. So, I come from a family where my grandparents fled anti-Semitism and persecution. The country took us in and protected us. And I feel an obligation to the country to pay back. And this is the highest, best use of my own set of skills to pay back. And so I want very much to be the kind of attorney general that you're saying I could become. And I'll do my best to try to be that kind of attorney general.
I believe your heart, and I'm grateful that you are living that MICA mandate.
Thank you, Senator Booker. I'm going to make